The wedding was a fairy tale come to life. Amelia Devereaux, glowing and pregnant, was marrying handsome tech millionaire Marcus Thorne at her family's legendary Newport estate. But in front of hundreds of guests, the fairy tale shattered. In a moment of drunken rage, Marcus shoved his new bride, sending her stumbling. What he didn't realize was that the woman who witnessed it, all the mother of the bride, was Genevieve Devereaux, a self-made billionaire with a reputation for corporate warfare. This is the story of how one violent act at a wedding triggered a mother's cold, calculated revenge to take over his entire company. The last golden rays of the August sun slanted across the immaculate lawns of the Devereaux estate in Newport, Rhode Island. The sprawling Gilded Age mansion known as Seacliff had been in the Devereaux family for generations, a silent testament to old money and enduring power. But the formidable fortune associated with the name today was not old. It was new, fierce, and entirely the creation of one woman, Genevieve Devereaux. And today, her only daughter Amelia was getting married. The event was the society wedding of the year. 300 guests, a curated list of international business titans, politicians and artists mingled on the vast terrace overlooking the Atlantic. Every detail was flawless, from the cascades of white orchids to the symphony orchestra playing softly near the cliffs. Amelia Devereaux, 4 months pregnant and radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown, seemed to float through the crowd. Her joy was palpable. She was deeply in love with Marcus Thorne, the man who stood beaming by her side. Marcus was the classic American success story rebooted for the 21st century. A charismatic entrepreneur from a modest background, he had founded a social media app called Connect Sphere that had exploded in popularity, turning him into a paper millionaire overnight. His company Innovate Dynamics was the darling of the tech world, and his personal charm was undeniable. But beneath the surface of the perfect day, a quiet tension hummed. It was a tension that emanated from the mother of the bride. Genevieve Devereaux, a woman in her late 50s with piercing blue eyes and an aura of unshakable authority, watched the couple from a distance. She had built a global private equity firm, Devereaux Capital, from the ground up, earning a reputation as a brilliant strategist and a ruthless negotiator. She saw the world as a complex chessboard, and she did not like the move her daughter was making. She had voiced her concerns to Amelia in private. It wasn't Marcus's middle-class background that bothered her. Genevieve respected ambition above all else. It was his type of ambition. It was loud, needy, and brittle. She saw the way he craved the approval of her wealthy friends, the way his eyes lingered on the trappings of her life, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at Amelia. She saw an insecurity so vast it bordered on a personality disorder. "His success is shallow, darling," Genevieve had warned Amelia gently a month before. "His company has one product, its user base is fickle, and its stock is built on hype, not fundamentals. A man whose entire identity is tied to something so fragile is a dangerous man." Amelia, ever the idealist, had defended him fiercely. "You don't know him, Mother. He's brilliant and driven, and he loves me. He's just intimidated by all of this." She had gestured around the opulent drawing room of Seacliff. "Wouldn't you be?" Genevieve had dropped the subject. She loved her daughter more than anything in the world, and she would not stand in the way of her happiness, even if she believed it was a mirage. So she wrote the checks for the wedding, smiled for the photographers, and watched her future son-in-law with the cool, analytical gaze of a predator studying its prey. Marcus, for his part, felt the weight of that gaze all day. He was marrying into a dynasty, and he was acutely aware that he was seen as an outsider, a parvenu. His net worth, tied entirely to the volatile stock of Innovate Dynamics, felt like monopoly money compared to the solid generational and self-made wealth of the Devereaux matriarch. This insecurity manifested as an over-the-top performance. He was too loud, his laughter too forced, his grip on Amelia's arm a little too tight. As the day wore on, he drank. Champagne at the cocktail hour, expensive scotch during dinner, vintage port with the cigars. Each drink seemed to fuel a growing arrogance, a desperate need to assert his dominance in a world where he felt like a guest. Amelia, sensitive to his moods, tried to steer him toward water, her touch on his arm gentle. "Darling, maybe let's slow down a bit. We still have to do the first dance." "Don't manage me." "Amelia," he slurred softly, his smile not wavering for the guests nearby, but his eyes turning hard. "I'm the groom. I'm celebrating. This is my day too." The possessive emphasis on "my" sent a small shiver down her spine, but she pushed it away. It was just the stress, the alcohol, the pressure. Tonight, she was Mrs. Marcus Thorne. She was pregnant with his child. It was the beginning of their forever. She clung to that thought like a prayer, unaware that their forever was destined to last only a few more hours. The reception was held in a magnificent glass pavilion, erected on the cliffs, the setting sun painting the ocean in hues of orange and violet. The orchestra swelled, and Marcus led Amelia to the center of the dance floor. For those 3 minutes, as they swayed to a classic Etta James song, the illusion was perfect. He held her close, whispering in her ear how beautiful she was, how he was the luckiest man alive. Amelia closed her eyes, allowing the magic of the moment to wash away her earlier unease. This was the man she loved. This was real. But the moment the dance ended and the guests flooded the floor, the illusion shattered. Marcus, buoyed by the applause and more champagne, became the boisterous, back-slapping caricature of a triumphant groom. He held court with a group of his tech bro friends, his voice growing louder, his gestures more expansive. Later in the evening, as the party was in full swing, Amelia saw him in a heated discussion with one of her father's old friends, a distinguished older gentleman named Senator Thompson. The senator was a major investor in a rival tech firm, and from their tense body language, Amelia could tell the conversation was not friendly. Marcus was jabbing a finger toward the senator's chest, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. Worried about a scene, Amelia approached them, her smile serene and practiced. "Gentlemen," she said gently, placing a hand on Marcus's arm. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I need to steal my husband away for a moment." Marcus whirled around, his eyes blazing with a fury she had never seen before. "I'm in the middle of a conversation, Amelia." He spat his voice a low growl that was meant only for her, but was sharp enough to make the senator take a half step back. "I know, darling," she said softly, trying to de-escalate. "But your mother is looking for us to cut the cake." She gave his arm a gentle, insistent tug. It was that small, public act of guidance that broke him. In his drunken, paranoid state, he didn't see a loving wife trying to save him from embarrassment. He saw a Devereaux managing him, controlling him, reminding him that this was her world, and he was just a guest. His reaction was instantaneous and shockingly violent. "Don't!" he snarled, ripping his arm from her grasp. "Touch me!" And then he shoved her. It wasn't a playful push. It was a hard, two-handed shove to her shoulders. The force of it sent Amelia 4 months pregnant and caught completely off guard, stumbling backward. She tripped on the hem of her own gown, her arms windmilling as she fought for balance. The crowd around them gasped in collective shock. The music seemed to stutter and die. Amelia crashed into a dessert table laden with champagne flutes and petit fours. The table tilted, and a cascade of glass and pastry tumbled to the floor around her as she landed heavily in a sitting position, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. For a moment, the entire wedding, all 300 guests, the orchestra, the staff froze in horrified silence. In that silence, only one person moved. Genevieve Devereaux had been watching from across the pavilion. She saw the argument, she saw Amelia's gentle intervention, and she saw the shove. She saw it all with a preternatural clarity, as if time had slowed down just for her. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out. Her face, which had been a mask of polite neutrality all day, hardened into something terrifying. It was the face the world's most powerful CEOs saw in a boardroom just before she dismembered their companies. While others rushed to help, a dazed and weeping Amelia Genevieve began to walk. Her pace was not hurried. It was deliberate, measured each step of her silver Manolo Blahniks, clicking on the marble floor like the countdown of a bomb. She walked directly toward her new son-in-law. Marcus, realizing what he had just done in front of the most powerful people in the country, was staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. His face was pale, the drunken flush gone replaced by a look of sheer panic. Genevieve stopped directly in front of him. She was a foot shorter than him, but at that moment she towered over him. She didn't say a word. She simply looked at him. Her cold blue eyes were not filled with a mother's grief, but with the dispassionate fury of a deity whose temple had just been desecrated. In her gaze, Marcus Thorne saw his entire future. The bright, glittering future he had married into the future he had just set on fire turned to ash. She held his gaze for a full 5 seconds. Then, without a word, she turned her back on him and walked toward her daughter. The wedding was over. The war had just begun. The chaos that erupted after the shove was swift and decisive, orchestrated by Genevieve with the precision of a military extraction. Within minutes, her personal security team had cordoned off the area around Amelia, shielding her from the prying eyes and camera phones of the guests. A quiet word to the orchestra leader had the music starting up again, a jarringly cheerful tune that did little to dispel the thick pall of shock that had fallen over the pavilion. Amelia, physically unharmed, but emotionally shattered, was whisked away through a private exit to the main house. Her fairy tale wedding had ended in a nightmare of public humiliation. She sat on a silk settee in her mother's private study, the magnificent gown now feeling like a costume from a tragedy, and wept until she had no tears left. Genevieve tended to her daughter with a tenderness that few people ever saw. She helped her out of the heavy dress, wiped her tear-streaked face with a cool cloth, and brought her a cup of warm, sweet tea, all without saying a word about Marcus. She was a fortress, a calm, impregnable wall of maternal love against the storm that had just broken over her daughter's life. It was only when Amelia's sobs had subsided into exhausted, shuddering breaths that Genevieve's demeanor shifted. She tucked a blanket around Amelia, kissed her forehead, and then stood up. The comforting mother vanished, replaced by the CEO of Devereaux Capital. "Get some rest, my love," she said, her voice soft but with an underlying edge of steel. "I have some phone calls to make." She walked into her adjoining office, a sleek, soundproofed command center with a panoramic view of the dark, churning ocean. She closed the heavy oak doors behind her. For a moment, she stood in the darkness, her hand pressed against the cool glass of the window, and allowed a single tear of pure, unadulterated fury to trace a path down her cheek. She wiped it away, not with sadness, but with a cold finality. Emotion was a luxury she could not afford. Action was the only salve for a wound this deep. She sat down at her large, clean desk and pressed a button on her encrypted phone. It was nearly midnight on a Saturday, but she knew the man on the other end would answer. "Caleb," she said, her voice low and devoid of any warmth. "Wake up your team. I have a new project for you." Caleb Shaw was the head of a discreet but incredibly effective corporate intelligence firm that Devereaux Capital kept on a multi-million-dollar annual retainer. A former MI6 agent, Caleb specialized in finding the hidden weaknesses of powerful people and corporations. "I'm officially retaining you for a full spectrum analysis of a company called Innovate Dynamics and its founder, Marcus Thorne." Genevieve continued, her voice as crisp as a stock market ticker. "I want to know everything. I want a deep dive on their financials, their corporate structure, their intellectual property, their data security protocols. I want to know where their funding came from and where their revenue really comes from. I want to know every corner they've ever cut, every line they've ever crossed." She paused. "And I want to know Marcus Thorne's personal life. Every bad debt, every disgruntled ex-partner, every secret. I want to know where he is vulnerable. I want a complete psychological and financial profile. I want you to find the rot." "Consider it done, Genevieve." Caleb's calm, professional voice came back through the line. "Is there a specific timeline?" "Immediate," Genevieve said. "I want your preliminary findings on my desk by Monday morning. Spare no expense. This is now your only priority." She hung up and made her second call this time to the head of her legal department, a man who had guided her through a dozen hostile takeovers. Her third call was to a legendary public relations strategist known for his ability to shape narratives and dismantle reputations with surgical precision. By 2 a.m., she had assembled her war council. Meanwhile, back at the wedding pavilion, Marcus was in a state of alcohol-fueled panic. He had tried to get to Amelia, but Genevieve's security had politely but firmly blocked his path. He was now a pariah at his own wedding. Guests were leaving in droves, whispering amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. His best man eventually bundled him into a waiting car, sending him back to the hotel suite that was supposed to have been his and Amelia's honeymoon suite. He spent the night leaving a series of increasingly desperate voicemails on Amelia's phone. They started apologetic. "I'm so sorry, baby, I'm a monster," moved to self-pitying. "I was just so stressed the pressure got to me," and finally, when she didn't respond, turned angry and threatening. "You can't do this to me, Amelia. After everything I've done for you, you will regret this." He had no idea that while he was shouting at a silent phone, a billionaire was quietly sharpening her knives. He thought he had a marital problem. He had no clue that the woman he had just humiliated was the daughter of one of the most powerful corporate predators in the world. He didn't just shove his wife. He had shoved a hornet's nest, and the queen was now marshalling her entire swarm for a single devastating purpose, his complete and utter annihilation. Marcus Thorne woke up the next morning in his palatial hotel suite to a blinding headache and a gut-wrenching sense of dread. The memory of the previous night played back in fractured, horrifying clips, the argument, Amelia's hurt face, the feel of his hands against her shoulders, the collective gasp of the crowd, Genevieve's icy stare. He had committed social and marital suicide on a spectacular public stage. His first instinct was survival. He showered, dressed in his most impeccable suit, and crafted a narrative. It was the alcohol, the stress, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. He would apologize, grovel by Amelia an outrageously expensive piece of jewelry. He would fix this. He was Marcus Thorne. He could fix anything. He spent the day trying to reach Amelia, but his calls went straight to voicemail. His texts, a torrent of apologies and excuses, were met with a digital wall of silence. He was blocked. When he tried to go to the Devereaux estate, he was met at the gates by a polite but immovable security guard, who informed him that he was not welcome on the property. By Monday, his panic began to curdle into a defensive arrogance. Fine. If they wanted to play it this way, he would too. He was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. He was a success. He didn't need them. He retreated to his fortress, the gleaming, ultra-modern headquarters of Innovate Dynamics, in the heart of Boston's tech hub. The office was a monument to his ego. It featured a rock-climbing wall, a gourmet cafeteria, and sleeping pods for employees who were expected to work around the clock. Marcus strode through the open-plan workspace, projecting an aura of confidence he did not feel. He called a company-wide meeting, announcing a bold new initiative, trying to create a bubble of normalcy against the encroaching chaos of his personal life. From the outside, Innovate Dynamics looked like an unstoppable force. Their App Connect sphere had over 100 million registered users. Its stock was soaring. But from the inside, it was a paper tiger, a company built on a foundation of precarious hype and risky shortcuts. The biggest secret was the user numbers. While they had 100 million registered users, the number of active daily users, the metric that truly mattered to advertisers and investors, was drastically lower and had begun to stagnate. To hide this, Marcus had approved a growth hacking strategy that was ethically dubious at best and fraudulent at worst. The company was secretly paying bot farms in Southeast Asia to create millions of fake accounts that would perform minimal automated activities on the app, liking posts, following accounts, creating the illusion of a vibrant, growing community. It was a lie that kept the stock price high and the investors happy. Their second, even more dangerous secret was their data security. In the race to scale up, they had cut corners. User data was stored on poorly encrypted servers. The privacy policy was a vague, jargon-filled document that gave the company sweeping rights to user information. A single sophisticated hack could expose the personal data of millions of users, a catastrophe that would instantly destroy the company's reputation and invite crippling government fines. Marcus was aware of these ticking time bombs, but he believed he could outrun them. He was convinced he could sell the company or launch a new successful product before the truth ever came out. His entire strategy was based on maintaining the illusion of success. He never imagined that someone would actively start searching for the bombs. While Marcus was playing the role of the unflappable CEO, Genevieve Devereaux was in her own war room at Devereaux Capital. Caleb Shaw and his team of forensic investigators had worked through the weekend. Their preliminary report lay on her desk. "He's sloppy," Caleb said via a secure video link, his face impassive. "And arrogant. It's a potent combination. His financials are a mess of aggressive accounting. He's capitalizing expenses that should be on the P&L statement to make the company look profitable when it's actually burning through cash at an alarming rate." "Find the fraud, Caleb," Genevieve said, her voice cold. "We're already on it," Caleb replied. "We've detected unusual network traffic originating from server farms in the Philippines and Vietnam, all interacting exclusively with the Connect Sphere API." The patterns are consistent with large-scale bot activity. We're also running a security audit on their servers. My tech team believes their firewalls are porous, to say the least." Genevieve listened, a slow, grim smile touching her lips. It was exactly as she had suspected. Marcus was not a brilliant innovator. He was a con artist in a hoodie. "Good," she said. "Keep digging. I want irrefutable proof. I want the kind of evidence that can be anonymously delivered to the Wall Street Journal and the FTC simultaneously." She ended the call and looked out her window at the city below. Marcus Thorne thought he was safe in his glass tower. He had no idea that she was already tunneling under his foundations, preparing to plant the dynamite that would bring his entire world crashing down. He had humiliated her daughter. Now she was going to teach him the difference between a paper tiger and a real one. For the next 2 weeks, an unnerving quiet settled over the conflict. Marcus, rebuffed by Amelia and her family, threw himself into his work with a manic intensity. He interpreted the silence as a victory of sorts. He believed he had weathered the initial storm. He assumed Amelia was having a dramatic, prolonged sulk, egged on by her overbearing mother, and that eventually, with the baby coming, she would have no choice but to return to him. The thought that Genevieve Devereaux, a corporate titan, would concern herself with a simple domestic dispute seemed absurd to him. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. During this lull, Genevieve's machine was operating at full silent capacity. Caleb Shaw's team of digital ghosts moved through the dark corners of the internet, mapping out the architecture of Marcus's deception. They didn't hack Innovate Dynamics. Genevieve would never authorize anything illegal that could be traced back to her. Instead, they used sophisticated analytics, tracked the digital footprints of the bot farms, and even had an operative pose as a potential advertiser to get a look at the company's non-public user engagement data, which was wildly inconsistent with their public statements. The breakthrough came from an old-fashioned source, human intelligence. Caleb's investigators located a disgruntled former employee of Innovate Dynamics, a talented senior engineer named Ben Carter, who had quit 6 months prior after a major ethical dispute with Marcus. Initially, Ben was hesitant to talk, bound by a strict non-disclosure agreement. But Caleb's associate, a lawyer specializing in whistleblower protection, showed him how Marcus's fraudulent activities likely invalidated the NDA. Assured of his legal protection, Ben opened the floodgates. He provided a sworn affidavit detailing the internal meetings where Marcus had explicitly ordered the engineering team to ignore data security protocols in favor of a faster product rollout. He described the Project Chimera initiative, the official internal code name for the program that purchased the services of the bot farms to inflate user statistics ahead of their last quarterly earnings report. He called it perception engineering. Ben said, his voice laced with disgust. He said the market runs on confidence, not reality. He was cooking the books just with user data instead of dollars. Most damningly, Ben provided evidence of a significant data breach that had occurred 3 months ago. A hacker had gained access to a server containing the personal information of nearly 1 million users. Marcus had ordered it covered up. The engineering team had patched the vulnerability, but no users were ever notified, nor were any regulatory bodies. It was a ticking time bomb, a clear violation of data privacy laws. Caleb Shaw delivered the package of evidence to Genevieve's office himself. It contained Ben Carter's signed affidavit, a detailed report on the bot farm activity with IP addresses and payment records, and a technical analysis of the covered-up data breach. "This is it," Caleb said. "This is the kill shot, The data breach cover-up alone is enough to trigger a massive FTC investigation and a flurry of class action lawsuits. The fraudulent user data will crater the stock once it's public." Genevieve reviewed the documents, her expression as calm as a frozen lake. The proof was irrefutable. She now had the ammunition she needed. It was time to begin the attack. Her first move was subtle and financial. She convened a meeting with the fiercely loyal managers of her private hedge fund, a division of Devereaux Capital. "We are taking a major short position in Innovate Dynamics," she announced, her voice leaving no room for debate. "Maximum leverage. I want to be positioned to make a fortune when this company collapses. This is not a gamble. This is a certainty." Short selling was a bet against a company's success, by borrowing and selling shares with the promise to buy them back later. A short seller profits when the stock price falls. Genevieve was not just predicting the fall of Innovate Dynamics. She was about to become the primary financial beneficiary of it. Her second move was to weaponize the information. She didn't want to be seen as the source of the attack. It needed to appear organic, the result of diligent investigative journalism. She called her PR strategist. "I have a story that needs to find the right home," she said. "I want it to go to Julianne Croft at the Wall Street Journal. She's tenacious, she protects her sources, and she has a Pulitzer for exposing corporate fraud. Give it to her as an anonymous encrypted tip. Everything she needs to verify the story is in the file. The affidavit, the server logs everything." The trap was now set. The financial mechanism was in place to profit from the destruction, and the narrative bomb had been handed to one of the most respected financial journalists in the world. While all this was happening, Amelia was finding her own footing. Living at Seacliff, surrounded by the quiet support of her mother, she began to heal. She started seeing a therapist and reconnected with old friends. She also started reading everything she could about Innovate Dynamics, about the tech world, about corporate governance. For the first time, she was looking at her husband's world, not as a supportive wife, but with the cool, analytical eye of a Devereaux. She was beginning to understand the fragility of his empire and the depth of his deception. One evening, she was talking to her mother in the library. "I feel so stupid," Amelia confessed. "I believed everything he said. I defended him to you." Genevieve put down her book and looked at her daughter, her expression soft. "You are not stupid, Amelia. You are trusting. You see the good in people. I consider that a strength, not a weakness. Your mistake was not in trusting him. It was in underestimating my ability to protect you when that trust was broken." She paused, her eyes glinting. He made a similar mistake, but his was far more costly. The first cut had been made. Marcus Thorne just hadn't started bleeding yet. The instrument of Marcus Thorne's destruction was not a physical weapon, but a digital file. It arrived in the encrypted inbox of Julianne Croft, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist for the Wall Street Journal, at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday. Julianne, a notorious workaholic, was awake chasing down a lead on an unrelated story. The anonymous message contained only a simple sentence: "The King of Connect Sphere has no clothes. Here is the proof." Below it was a link to a secure, password-protected file. Julianne was accustomed to such cryptic tips. Most turned out to be nothing. But as she downloaded and unzipped the file, her journalistic instincts began to scream. It wasn't a rambling manifesto from a disgruntled employee. It was a meticulously organized dossier. There was a signed, notarized affidavit from a former senior engineer, complete with contact information for his legal counsel. There were server logs, internal emails, and financial records detailing payments to obscure entities in the Philippines and Vietnam. And there was a highly technical but terrifyingly clear report on a major unremediated data breach. For the next 48 hours, Julianne and a small trusted team at the Journal worked in a state of feverish secrecy. She didn't take the information at face value. She verified it. Her tech reporters confirmed that the server logs were authentic, and the patterns were undeniably indicative of bot activity on a massive scale. She had an off-the-record conversation with a high-level source at the Federal Trade Commission, who, without confirming specifics, stated that Innovate Dynamics had been on their radar due to an unusual number of consumer data complaints. The final confirmation came when she managed to reach Ben Carter's lawyer, who verified the authenticity of his client's explosive affidavit. Julianne knew she was holding a corporate hand grenade. This was the kind of story that didn't just report to the news. It made the news. It would vaporize a multi-million-dollar company, destroy a CEO, and send shockwaves through the tech industry. On Monday evening, she filed her story. Tuesday morning, Marcus Thorne strode into his office feeling invincible. The 2 weeks of silence from the Devereaux camp had filled him with a renewed sense of arrogant confidence. He'd concluded that Genevieve's stony silence at the wedding was just theatrics. What could she really do? Their worlds were different. She was an old-world predator of finance. He was a new-world titan of tech. He believed she didn't understand his business, and therefore couldn't touch him. He was pouring his first espresso of the day when his phone began to vibrate violently on his desk. Then a second phone, his private line, began to ring. An alert from his stock app flashed across his screen, INVD. Trading halted pending news. A knot of ice formed in his stomach. His assistant burst in without knocking her face white as a sheet holding a tablet. "Mr. Thorne," she stammered, "you need to see this." He snatched the tablet from her hand. The headline from the Wall Street Journal seemed to leap off the screen, the words burning themselves into his brain. Innovate Dynamics House of Cards. Whistleblower alleges fraudulent user data massive data breach cover-up. He read the first few paragraphs, his vision tunneling the noise of the office, fading into a dull roar in his ears. He saw the quotes from the anonymous engineer. He saw the details of Project Chimera. He saw the specifics of the data breach he had personally ordered his team to bury. It wasn't an attack. It was an execution. Every secret, every shortcut, every lie he had ever told to build his fragile empire was laid bare for the entire world to see. When the Nasdaq opened, the storm hit with the force of a hurricane. Trading in Innovate Dynamics stock was a bloodbath. It was unhalted, plunged another 20% in 5 minutes, and was halted again. The financial news networks cut away from their scheduled programming to cover the spectacular implosion. Analysts who had been singing his praises just last week were now on air calling him a charlatan and predicting the company's imminent demise. The internal chaos was just as swift. A frantic emergency conference call was convened among the board members, everyone except Marcus. Philip Croft, his face grim, led the panicked discussion. "What in God's name happened?" one board member, a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, demanded. "Did any of you know about this?" There was a chorus of angry denials. They had been duped, lied to. Their personal reputations and fortunes were now tied to a sinking ship, captained by a con artist. "Our legal counsel says the shareholder lawsuits have already started being filed." Another director added, his voice strained. "We could be facing personal liability for this. He lied to us. He lied to the SEC. He has to go." It was into this atmosphere of pure terror and recrimination that a call was patched through from the office of Genevieve Devereaux. It was not Genevieve herself, but the head of her mergers and acquisitions team. The message was calm, concise, and utterly brutal. Genevieve Devereaux was monitoring the situation with concern, and she felt that a change in leadership was the only conceivable first step to restoring any semblance of market confidence. The subtext was clear: get rid of him or I will burn what's left of this company to the ground. The board understood. The call was a directive, not a suggestion. Consumed by a tidal wave of rage and paranoia, Marcus could only think of one source for his ruin. He grabbed his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. He knew Amelia wouldn't answer, but this time she did. Her voice, when it came, was calm and collected, a serene island in the middle of his raging inferno. You, he spat his voice a venomous hiss. You and your mother. You did this to me. From the sun-drenched garden at Seacliff, Amelia listened, a book resting in her lap. Hello, Marcus, she said, her tone disarmingly pleasant. Don't you hello Marcus me, he screamed, beginning to pace his office like a cooled animal. You fed this story to the press. This is your revenge, isn't it? Because I finally stood up to you. Because I wouldn't let you and your family control me. My family. Amelia's voice was still calm, but now it held a note of cold steel that made the hairs on his arm stand up. Marcus, I was your biggest defender. I believed in your vision when my own mother saw you for exactly what you were. This isn't about my family's name. It's about your lack of character. My character, I built $1 billion company. Your mother is a shark, a monster who destroys things for profit. My mother is a force of order, Amelia retorted, her voice rising with a strength he had never heard before. You brought chaos into my life. You lied to me. You disrespected me. You hurt me. You built a company that hurt its users and deceived the public. My mother doesn't destroy things, Marcus. She restores balance. It's a concept you've never been able to understand. He let out a harsh, desperate laugh. This is all about money, isn't it? You think you're going to get a bigger settlement now? Well, there's nothing left, and the prenup is ironclad. I made sure of that. At least I was smart enough to protect myself from a gold digger. The moment the word gold digger left his lips, he knew he had made a final fatal error. The brief silence on the other end of the line was more chilling than any shout. You're right, Marcus, Amelia said, her voice now dangerously soft. The prenup is ironclad, and I look forward to honoring it. I wouldn't want a single dollar that has your name attached to it. What you fail to understand is that I don't need your money. I have something far more valuable. I have my name. And as of today, you don't. She hung up. The click of the phone disconnecting was for Marcus, the sound of the last door in the world slamming shut in his face. The storm had broken, and it had washed away everything, leaving him utterly, completely alone in the wreckage. The 2 days following the publication of the article were a blur of corporate carnage. For Marcus Thorne, it was like watching his own autopsy performed in real time on every major news network. He was trapped in a soundproofed glass office, but the screams of his dying company were deafening. He saw the stock price on his monitor, a vertical red line plunging into an abyss. He saw the headlines, each one a fresh stab wound to his ego. He saw the emails flooding in from panicked investors and furious advertisers. His carefully constructed universe, built on bravado and bots, was disintegrating by the hour. Yet he still clung to a sliver of delusional hope, the board. They were his appointees, his allies. They had gotten rich alongside him. Surely they wouldn't abandon him. He was wrong. What Marcus didn't know was that his fate had already been sealed in a series of quiet, brutally efficient phone calls orchestrated by a master strategist. The most important of these calls took place the evening the story broke between Genevieve Devereaux and Philip Croft, the elder statesman of the Innovate Dynamics board. Philip, a seasoned venture capitalist in his 70s, was in a state of controlled panic. He knew the company was facing a cataclysm. When his private line rang and he saw Genevieve Devereaux's name, his heart sank. He was expecting a threat, a lawsuit. Instead, he was met with a voice of chilling, predatory calm. "Philip." Genevieve began dispensing with pleasantries. "You have a problem that is currently metastasizing on the front page of the Wall Street Journal." "Genevieve, I had no idea," Philip started, but she cut him off. "What you did or did not know is irrelevant now. What matters is what you do next. Your CEO is a fraud. Your board is now exposed to shareholder lawsuits for gross negligence and a dereliction of fiduciary duty. The FTC will likely seek to hold board members personally liable for the data breach cover-up. Your reputation, which you have spent 50 years building, will be in tatters by the end of the week." She let the cold, hard facts sink in. She wasn't shouting. She was laying out the parameters of his prison cell. "There is, however, a path forward," she continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, the way a hunter might soothe a cornered animal. "A narrow one. If the board acts decisively, if you remove the cancer immediately and show a commitment to radical transparency, you may mitigate some of the damage. Oust him, publicly and unanimously." "And then what?" Philip asked, his voice a weary rasp. "The company is worthless. The brand is toxic." "Not worthless," Genevieve corrected him. "Just deeply, deeply discounted. I am prepared to offer a solution to that as well. Once he is gone, Devereaux Capital will make an all-cash offer to acquire the company. It will not be a generous offer. It will be a salvage operation. But it will be enough to give your shareholders something back, and more importantly, it will shield you and the other board members from further liability. I am offering you a lifeboat, Philip. It is a small boat, I grant you, but the alternative is drowning." The conversation was over. It was not a negotiation. It was the delivery of terms of surrender. Philip Croft knew he had been checkmated. The emergency board meeting was a grim formality. Marcus dialed in his face a mask of forced confidence. He launched into a rambling defensive speech, blaming short sellers, jealous competitors, and a vindictive media. He talked about loyalty, about the battles they had won together. He sounded less like a CEO and more like a tin-pot dictator in the final hours of his reign. Philip Croft let him finish. Then, with the weight of inevitability in his voice, he said, "Marcus, thank you. We will now proceed to the first motion on the agenda." He read the motion of no confidence aloud, his voice flat and dispassionate. One by one, the faces on the screen, the men and women Marcus had made rich voted aye. The final vote was 8-0. "The motion carries," Philip said. "Marcus, you are hereby removed as chairman and CEO of Innovate Dynamics, effective immediately. We will arrange for the contents of your office to be sent to you. Your corporate accounts have been frozen. This call is now terminated." The screen in front of Marcus went blank. For a full minute, he just sat there, staring at his own reflection in the dark monitor. The silence in his opulent office was absolute. Then a primal roar of pure, impotent rage tore from his throat. He swept his arm across his desk, sending his laptop awards and pictures crashing to the floor. But the rage quickly subsided, leaving behind a cold, hollow emptiness. A quiet knock came at his office door. 2 large security guards entered. "Mr. Thorne," one said, not unkindly, "we've been asked to escort you from the building." The acquisition was just as swift. The board, battered and terrified, gratefully accepted Devereaux Capital's lowball offer. The news broke the next morning. Devereaux Capital acquires beleaguered Innovate Dynamics in fire sale. The era of Marcus Thorne was officially over. A week later, Amelia sat in a quiet, anonymous cafe in Boston's North End. She had chosen it specifically because it held no memories. She watched Marcus shuffle in a ghost of the man he had been. The bespoke suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He was unshaven, and the arrogant fire in his eyes had been replaced by a haunted, defeated glaze. He slumped into the chair opposite her. "Was it worth it?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Was it worth all this just to see me fall?" Amelia looked at him not with the anger he expected, but with a profound, almost weary sadness. "You think this was about you falling, Marcus. That's your ego talking. It always is," she said, her voice calm and steady. "This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. It was about accountability." "Accountability?" He scoffed, a flicker of his old self returning. "Your mother bought my company for pennies on the dollar and made a fortune shorting the stock. She's a vulture, Amelia. A monster." "My mother is a builder," Amelia corrected him gently. "You are the one who destroyed the company with your lies and your greed. She simply bought the rubble. She will rebuild it into something strong and honest. She didn't do this to you, Marcus. She did it for me. There is a difference." She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "You built your life on a lie. You lied to your investors, you lied to your users, and you lied to me. But the biggest lie you told was to yourself. You believed you were a king, a titan. But you were just a scared little boy, terrified that someone would find out you weren't as smart as you pretended to be. The shove at the wedding. That wasn't about me. It was about your own terror. You couldn't stand that for 1 second. I was the one in control." She placed a hand on her belly, a gesture of quiet strength. "I'm going to have a son. He will be a Devereaux. He will be raised to understand that true strength isn't about how much money you have or how loud you can shout. It's about integrity. It's about respecting others, especially the people you claim to love. That is the lesson here." He stared at her, speechless. The calm, confident woman sitting before him was a stranger. "My lawyer will be sending your lawyer the divorce papers," she said, reaching into her purse. "There's a prenuptial agreement. I will be honoring it." He looked at her confused. "But there's nothing left. The stock is worthless. My assets are frozen." "I know," she said. "I don't want a single dollar from you. I never did." She stood up, placing a crisp $20 bill on the table to cover their coffees. "All I want is your signature. Goodbye, Marcus." She walked out of the cafe and didn't look back, leaving him alone with his ruin and the crushing weight of the truth. Months later, Amelia stood in the nursery of her new home, a beautiful, light-filled brownstone in Beacon Hill. The room was filled not with expensive designer furniture, but with comfortable, well-loved pieces and shelves overflowing with children's books. She held her son Theodore, rocking him gently as he slept. The door opened softly, and Genevieve entered. She was not the formidable CEO of Devereaux Capital now, but simply a grandmother. She came and stood beside Amelia, looking down at the baby with an expression of pure, unconditional love. "He has your eyes," Genevieve whispered. They stood in comfortable silence. For a moment, watching the baby breathe. Aura Connect went public today, Genevieve said quietly. It was the new name for the rebuilt company. It opened 30% above the initial offering price. Is that good? Amelia asked, a small smile on her face. It is acceptable, Genevieve replied, the ghost of her corporate persona flickering in her eyes. She looked at her daughter. Marcus is facing federal indictment. He took a plea deal. He'll serve at least 5 years. Amelia nodded, a chapter of her life finally truly closing. Do you think Theo will ever need to know, she asked softly, about him? About what you did? Genevieve reached out and gently brushed a stray curl from Amelia's forehead. He needs to know that he comes from a line of women who do not suffer fools, she said, her voice a mixture of steel and tenderness. He needs to know that his mother is the strongest person I have ever met, and he needs to know that he is and always will be fiercely, unconditionally loved and protected. She looked from her daughter to her grandson, her 2-person dynasty. The rest is just business. And so Marcus Thorne's glittering empire, built on ego and deceit, was dismantled by a force he never saw coming, a mother's love sharpened to a razor's edge. Genevieve Devereaux's response was not just revenge. It was a masterclass in corporate warfare, a brutal lesson in consequences. Amelia, emerging from the wreckage, found her own strength and a new life for her and her son, proving that true wealth is not what you own, but what you stand for. This story shows that when you threaten a family, you might just be messing with an empire. What do you think of Genevieve's actions? Was it justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were riveted by this tale of drama and payback, please hit that like button, share it, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.